Yeah, you said we were going to talk about critical review, and I don't know if you know, but I brought these two to look at, and I have a whole shelf back there full of critical reviews.
You know
Still,
what? Man,
after
camera worked. I wish my camera worked. I have about, I don't know, 25 issues of critical review. I was receiving them for a while, and then as time went on and I wasn't involved, I fell off the mailing list or something. But I have quite a few issues. Hold up, you had an orange one just now. Can you hold that up?
Communitarianism and liberalism.
Oh yeah, that's one of the older ones. Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. Is when we were at the seminar, Jeff said, where I asked him, I said, can I get copies of Critical Review? Can I get any kind of discount? And he said, yeah, well, if you buy back issues, I'll give you like a 20% discount or whatever he offered. And so I bought a whole bunch of back issues of ones that I wanted.
Communitarianism and liberalism.
Yep, that's the one.
This is like what, 1994. Yeah, the politics of communitarianism. Communitarianism is just not a term you hear much anymore.
You do actually over here in England.
Okay. Do you remember a guy named Amitai Etzioni?
Amitai Etzioni. I don't think so. Who is he?
He's a communitarian theorist.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. There's a kind of a link between what we were just talking about, COVID, and this, and that's the Foucault notion of biopolitics.
Okay.
That is kind of the regime of controlling bodies on kind of epidemiological grounds. And there's a guy named Jeff Schellenberger who I interviewed. He's New York based. He's written for some Marxist magazines, but also the American Spectator, which is the Spectator America version, or Spectator US, which is more right aligned. And he's talked about how this notion of biopolitics now is far more fashionable on the right than it is on the left. And this suspicion of controlling bodies for ostensibly medical purposes. And
right.
And the overlap with communitarianism is that, well, frankly, I guess because communitarianism feels more like a continental philosophy sort of idea, and Foucault is from the continent, so it's a pretty tenuous link anyway.
Yeah.
So, there was also he discussed recently the so-called hermeneutics of suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the term hermeneutics? I mean, I know I'm bringing it up, but do you?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually I'm not probably going to explain it very well because I've always actually had trouble with it. It's one of those words that you know what it means and you've defined it for yourself 100 times, but you can never explain it to someone else.
Yeah, something to do with discourse, though, I gather.
Sorry?
Something to do with discourse, I gather.
Yeah.
The rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, this hermeneutics of suspicion. So the reason, so just kind of at a higher level, the reason the right now seems to be more kind of conspiratorial, subversive, marginal, kind of gnawing at the ankles of kind of the mainstream conversation. It's because a lot of that kind of new left suspicion has now moved to the right. At the same time, the left has become a bit more institutionalized and trusting. So that's why you have things like the left claiming the right is aligned with foreign actors to subvert democracy, and the kind of things that they used to be, that the left used to be charged with, and kind of in the Oliver Stone era, So conspiracies. I recall the movie JFK, which is Oliver Stone film, and the JFK assassination and all of that, and it was all much more aligned with a bunch of weirdo people on the left who were all somehow questioning mainstream claims, institutional claims. A lot of that energy now seems to be on the right. At the same time, the left has become kind of normie. And his hermeneutics of suspicion, after he says the linchpin is that post 9/11, there began to be a divergence between theory people and conspiracy people. And so just right after 9/11, questioning the official narrative was left wing. But by the end of the 2000s, it became somewhat more aligned with Alex Jones and people on the right. And
Yeah.
then through the 2010s, conspiracy became more and more fashionable, and the left and right began to switch places. So
Yeah.
I think there might be something to that.
I think there might be something to that. I mean, I would say that it has always been on both sides, and it's just what they're suspicious of and what they're but based on like when you can sort of have a pendulum, and you usually see a pendulum in politics, right, where you basically you have one party in power and it stays in power for 2 terms at least, and then something happens and it, like there's a breakdown and then it swings the other way, and then and it's partly just that voters get sick of and they start to hate the party in power, and so they vote for the other party. So it's very natural in democracies that you have this pendulum swinging back and forth, right? And but then with that you get also cultural change, right? So like the culture during Reagan was different than the culture during Clinton. Right. And those, you're naturally going to have change anyway, and you're going to have technological advancements, and you're going to have, various external factors, and all of that. But it's also, closely within what the politics is. Right. Because the party in power and the president sort of set a lot of the agenda and around that affects cultural things as well. Right. And so anyway, as those cultural shifts happen and you have this sort of pendulum going back and forth, that's going to affect the conspiracy theories. And it's also going to affect which side is more likely to have more of them, because if the other party is in power, then they're going to look at them, they're going to be more suspicious of the government. They're going to be more likely to start believing things about that party which is in power, and so they're those conspiracy theories are going to spread further, right? They're going to become a bigger deal. Do you see what I'm saying? And when the cultural things change, then it changes whether people are also, making conspiracy theories about alternative medicine or making conspiracy theories about this or that. That's, that'll be affected by the cultural shifts as well and stuff like that, right?
Alternative medicine is an interesting one. There seems to be an overlap there, left and right. So you've got Gwyneth Paltrow's business, I believe it's called Goop, selling potentially weird things. But someone pointed out that if you look at the Alex Jones website, the merchandise section, it looks remarkably like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, there always has been a little bit of both sides getting into that kind of stuff. But it has traditionally been more big on the left, where you have belief in all kinds of herbal remedies and stuff, because people on the left are more likely to say, oh, the Native Americans already knew what they were doing, and the Chinese knew it for thousands of years, and all of this stuff, and so they're more likely to kind of believe that whatever little bit of thing from the garden is going to cure me. But then you also have religious people on the right who believe that prayer can heal you, and so they might as well throw in someone can sell them something to go along with the prayer, and they may well believe in it too. So it's always kind of been on both sides, I think.
Yeah, somehow I think the rhino horn giving you a better erection is a bigger deal on the right than the left. But because
people on the left wouldn't want to kill a rhino just to have an erection. So
yeah. So this notion of conspiracy theory, though, it feels a bit naive on my part to say this now, but it occurs, not so much occurred to me, but it was sort of revealed to me that conspiracy isn't just a bottom-up phenomenon explaining things happening at the top. People in the top have conspiracies about things happening at the bottom. So you said a moment ago, conspiracy about those in power. There are also conspiracies about those not in power, and so that would come from claiming that. For instance, white supremacist infiltration of Trump directing him, or some of these claims are rather dubious. Not in any kind of rhetorical link, I say, necessarily in the case of Trump and white supremacy, but white supremacist actors kind of directing his campaign or something.
I think there were probably white supremacist actors within his campaign structure. I don't think they were directing things, because nobody can tell Trump what to do.
The theory of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that is an example of a conspiracy, but one coming from the halls of power, not from a trailer park, right? So once you account for conspiracies happening on both sides, the top and bottom, it's not clear to me that conspiracy is always somehow subversive of regime stability.
Okay, I think we have to clarify what you're saying. First of all, you keep saying conspiracy, but are you talking about conspiracy or conspiracy theory? Right? Because there are real conspiracies that really happen.
Saddam harboring Al Qaeda is a conspiracy theory.
Sorry?
Like the idea that Saddam is conspiring with Al Qaeda to release weapons of mass destruction is a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But the context in which we hear that term is typically aimed at those outside of power who are somehow threatening institutional stability. Right?
Well, but if you think about it, the FBI, say, for example, and all the other security agencies are constantly looking at, they constantly have theories about conspiracies because one of their jobs is to go after conspiracies, right? And so in the case of the national security, like looking, intelligence agencies looking at Saddam but they're, they also have to look, was there a conspiracy between Saddam and Al Qaeda? And then they fabricated some evidence to say that there was, right? And there's many different ways of interpreting that, but it could well have just been people wanted to believe it, and then they found some tiny evidence, and then someone tricked them, and et cetera, et cetera. But presumably they did believe it, or maybe they didn't believe it. But anyway, I think that's quite different because their job is to look for conspiracies. The job of the FBI is to look for conspiracies. The job of the police is to look, police inspectors and detectives or whatever is to look for conspiracies. And the attorneys general and everything to look for conspiracies. That's their job. They had a theory maybe about, that turned out to be wrong about Saddam and Al Qaeda. Whether they believed it or not, let's assume they believed it, but they were wrong. But that's quite different than people who don't have that as a job, who don't have the resources, just coming up with a theory and then spreading it around. That's a very different thing.
It's the job of every citizen to be informed, right? So that's what they're doing. They're attempting to explain what's happening.
But they're not really, people who believe in conspiracy theories generally aren't attempting to explain what's going on around and doing proper research. Generally, what they're doing is wanting to see patterns and finding them and getting suspicious about people because they don't like them, they don't like the way it smells. And so they go and they track some, and they're not really doing their job and they're not doing it well. And you can say that nor was the intelligence agencies when it came to Saddam and Al Qaeda, but they weren't doing it as badly as most people who believe in conspiracy theories. They did find some evidence, and they, Okay,
one could say then that so they're not charged with the populace is not charged with looking for positing conspiracies, trying to confirm it or not, in the same way more institutions are, such as the FBI. But when something like the FBI gets it wrong, it's so much more consequential. So there may be less individually outrageous claims occurring within the FBI, but they can be moderately outrageous, but can be so much more consequential, which makes the conspiracy theorizing of someone deep in Idaho less ultimately catastrophic if they were to get it wrong. On the other hand, if they get it right, it's also good, right? And that actually gets back to or the FBI, if they get it right, that's good. And that kind of gets back to the libertarian argument about trusting these large institutions. They'll claim unintended consequences, but often the consequences are intended and they're positive, right? So just mass vaccination for polio or something. I'm pretty sure that was led from the top by government.
Yeah.
Right. So, right. Anyway.
I think government can do some really good things, and I think my problem with the libertarian ideology right now is that I do think that people who actually have another agenda can use the libertarian ideology to their advantage to try to cover up their other agenda and kind of push for what they want, whether that's simply their agenda is I want lower taxes on my corporation, or whether that agenda is something more sinister, like kind of white supremacist stuff. And I think since Trump, I think we've seen that people have used, this sort of libertarian ideology as a cover for something worse, for something, like white supremacist kind of stuff. And I did a little 2-part video on it because it's something that really shocked me. I didn't expect it. But when you think about it, when you really look at the libertarian ideology and you look at the way that people prioritize within it, like prioritize as more of a right libertarian or a left libertarian, you can kind of see that you can make your own path through that and use just the parts of libertarianism that you like the same way that people cherry pick parts of Christianity, of the Bible, to sort of create their version of Christianity, which might be nothing like what Jesus would have liked or whatever. But people cherry pick from libertarianism as well. And so you get these very different belief systems within it, very different moralities within it. Some of them are very selfish. Some of them are very, free and easy, like you can do what you want and I can do what I want, Anyway, I have some problems with it because I do think bad faith actors have been using it in America because it's so profoundly part of the American culture, even though you wouldn't say that most Americans are libertarians and the Libertarian Party never wins. Because that's quite extreme, yeah. But everyone understands it and understands that ideology. It speaks to American, to the American character.
Yeah, there's a kind of just latent libertarianism here in everyone all the time.
Yeah.
Even what's happening on the left right now with, defund the police stuff. That sounds like an austerity program for police. And the left has generally moved. They've kind of combined social liberalism with a kind of creeping libertarian ethos. So they sort of celebrate the kind of hyper deracinated, consumerist, individually tailored experience. So let's say progressive posting on Twitter, like, "Ugh, everyone leave me alone. I just want to Netflix and chill and get my DoorDash. Fuck off," Dashes of food. You have DoorDash over there, don't you? Or is
no, not that I know of. No.
Food delivery app. Anyway, and then just kind of blasé attitudes about defunding the police, and even with COVID, they haven't been particularly they don't seem sufficiently alarmed about education privatization moving in where public schools are not right now. So there's a kind of, like I said, there's a kind of a low-level, low-key libertarianism happening within the American discussion all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. I think so. I mean, I would say about the defund the police thing, though, like police have had so much money and like militarization, like all these like weapons from the army and all of that. And they've been, so far relied on so much because there haven't been other social programs. So like people will call the cops or call 911 and the 911 will send the cops when it's actually, an issue where you need a social worker or you need something else. And I think that the defund the police thing is kind of saying like, we should shrink down the role of the police but actually give money to other programs that can take over some of this stuff, like have social workers or other people that are around that can come when there's a problem that really a police officer isn't trained to handle. I think that's what it's about, really.
It's just odd that
But yeah, they're using a term that sounds very libertarian. Maybe to a
usually, if a government institution is failing, the progressive answer has been to give it more money. This is the first don't want to give it more money.
Yeah. But again, I think that's partly because, because they don't trust the police that much, all the time because, the whole Black Lives Matter thing, the police have been found to have, not treated everyone very well. I'm not saying all cops are like this, but especially when they have all this money and this militarization, all of these weapons. I mean, in the UK, they don't even carry guns. 99% of cops don't even carry guns. They're just a very few that are trained to do that. So, you can de-escalate, you can do all of these things without all of this, massive weaponry. And I know it's different. And, since there are citizens in America with guns, it makes sense that the cops would have guns. I know it's different, but still, I think people on the left are like worry about that. Like someone with a gun is going to come into my house because I called 911, even though I didn't want a cop with a gun to come in. I wanted someone else. I wanted someone who can, handle the situation differently. Like when it's not certain situations that they send cops in. Cause I don't know, the kid is freaking out, cause he's got this weird autistic problem or this thing. And, and he's freaking out and you want someone, but you want a social worker. You don't want a cop with a gun,
Yeah. In the odd case of someone with autism, I suppose.
Whatever. Yeah. I was trying to come up with some example. I don't, but you do hear about this kind of thing. Yeah. And that's part of what the defund the police is about, is like cops get called to the scene a lot of times when you don't need a cop, you need something else.
Yeah. There's been an effort to, in some locales in the US, they claim that police should have to have college degrees. And speaking of perpetuating a kind of class interest, people have criticized that. You watch.
Oh, I lost you there. I can't hear you.
Okay, never mind. There was a noise there for a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's a claim that the police should have college degrees, and that's been criticized. Just another effort to feed the education industrial complex. No one should be outside of it. They should have to go through the same. The journalistic class is overwhelmingly college educated, and that's thought to be a way of furthering their class interests, getting the police on board ideologically with where they're at, and also giving them a more legitimate claim to the power that they have now. If you're furthering the entrenchment of credentials as authority, right?
Mm.
And that's a huge theme on the right now. There's just incredible dislike of the credentialed class of journalists, and the kind of the hegemony.
Well, isn't that part of the anti-elitism of populism?
Yeah, and it's weird too, because the right-wing version of that is they're only against cultural elites. It's not economic elites per se.
Right.
And when they don't like economic elites, say Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or something like that, it's only incidental to the fact that they primarily dislike them for cultural reasons.
Yeah.
See, a lot of the left now is made up of culture warriors too. They've moved away from class. So I'm seeing this kind of strange overlap between some on the right and then some on the left who are trying to be well, let me back up for a second. Class reductionist has become a bit of a smear on the left to people who are primarily more interested in, say, racial justice.
Okay.
So there's a bit of an overlap between kind of the old school Marxist left and the right, who are both critical of kind of what they call woke capital,
Right.
And, yeah, and so they overlap in dislike of the credentialed class.
Huh. That's interesting. I hadn't realized that was going on the left in America. But I can understand that, especially, with the whole Black Lives Matter thing being such a big part of what's happening right now. I can see that there would be a thing where, people would start to say, well, look, even if they're rich, because it's true, even some very wealthy Black people have been, pulled over by the cops and harassed, and I think you have Congress people, and and you have athletes, and you have all kinds of people who have come out to say, I've experienced this, and so even though I'm super wealthy and powerful or whatever, I've experienced this too. So that would create a conversation on the left about class, income class versus other factors. Yeah, and I think that's why they also have what is the term for that, where it's the intersection of all these issues of class, race, sex and gender.
I think that's
intersectionality. I think they call it intersectionality. Is that it?
Yeah. So I'm beginning to see what I think is a kind of distinct political orientation that just is consumed by the news all the time. That's almost like a third way, if you will. I guess a fourth way, if we say the left and right both have versions of it. And then so there are people consumed by just current events, one thing after another. And then there are the people who are still kind of trying to see some kind of more historical, bigger picture, or take some kind of approach of that sort. Yeah, that doesn't have any kind of actionable consequences, though. So what does that mean as to who I should be aligned with or something? It doesn't really tell you. But I think that's fine. That's kind of interesting. The media environment now is so omnipresent and compelling all the time that it really is, I think, setting up a whole new paradigm. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're just in a moment of transition in terms of media and stuff. And, there's this problem of the echo chamber division of media where, it already was like half of people were watching Fox News and half of people were watching, CNN and MSNBC, et cetera. But then with, the Twitter and YouTube and, all of the internet of news, it became obviously even more so as people like went into their little rabbit hole of echo chamber. But because of that, and because of like the Trump, years where, it was just constant news, because anytime Trump tweeted something, it became news.
Yeah.
And because a lot of times it was shocking, or a lot of times it was, and he loved that. And so, he would create these news cycles. And so people have got more and more wrapped up in this, super quick news cycle. Even, it used to be that 24-hour cable news was this, this total change and into this 24-hour thing. But it's even gone beyond that with the internet and everything, that it's like every second of every day you have a new news.
The 24-hour cable news was not literally in your back pocket in something called a smartphone, right?
Right.
You accidentally come across news now, just engaging with your phone in a way you wouldn't have in 1999. You would have had to, go turn on the television. Well, I suppose if you were at the airport, you would be distracted by headline news or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, no, it definitely happened. And, even when you just had an afternoon paper, evening paper, you could accidentally see it as you walk down the street. I mean, we've accidentally come across news, but it's very different when it's like the news itself is created in that moment. And it doesn't even break into the middle, breaking news on the cable show, channel, which you might catch in a pub or whatever. It's not that. It's like your phone tells you, and you pick it up, and it's like 2 seconds ago this happened, and you're reading it there, and now you can comment on it, and you can share it with your friends, which is just a much more interactive, much more instant gratification, and just instant, because you get a notification. It doesn't matter where you are. And then you get to share it with other people in a way that you couldn't before. You can only tell them if you saw them, or call them on the phone. But now you can share it with your 1,000 followers or your 10, 20,000 followers or whatever. So it's very different.
Yeah, this is an interesting.
It has a lot of effects, I think.
This is an interesting effect where the people who will generally celebrate market forces seem to have a special exception for media. They think the hyper-competitive media environment has actually made things worse, whereas, for simple, commodities or something, yeah, it's fine because,
I do think this is something that economists, a lot of economists have trouble understanding, that there are differences. And that's why people have pushed for regulations forever, because they recognize that there are differences in different industries and different sectors. The fact that media is responding with, the supply and demand version of media, where it's like the supply and demand version of media is basically the populism of media, right? It's populism or mass democracy, is not the only way that you can do politics, right? Having a two-party representative system and having those politicians represent you, not just do whatever it is that you want. It's very different. You ask your representative, in power to think for you, to talk to people, to, consult with experts, and to come up with, a good plan, rather than just asking you, like in a direct democracy way, like, should I do this? And then you go, yeah, do that. And then you do it. That's like the mob democracy, direct democracy kind of stuff. And it doesn't work that well. And media that acts that way, right, is just as bad. It's just giving you what you want. What is it that you want? You want to watch a car chase? You want to watch a building on fire, but never actually sorting through the news and figuring out what is a good thing for people to understand. And a lot of people, especially on the right at the moment, they hate that idea. I don't want this, these gatekeepers telling me what I should know and what I shouldn't know and all of that. But journalism is a long and proud tradition of, actually working on behalf of the people. It's not some propaganda thing from the top. It's a whole bunch of individual journalists who have ethics about how to do journalism, doing investigative journalism, trying to find the most important stories for people on their behalf, saying, I will expose corruption for you. I will expose, this conspiracy about, Saddam Hussein having weapons. That's not true. That these people have a conspiracy theory. It's wrong. I will expose that for you. These are journalists who care and who are working hard. But if you just have let's respond to what the people want immediately, like, as I might say, Fox News does it worse, they're not really getting news.
Well, but journalism has has for some time now been moving away from the kind of just the facts ma'am approach. So I think that might be, I'm not sure I entirely understand you, but I feel like it's outdated. They've been moving in an advocacy journalism direction for a while. You know,
it's been going on for long. The Daily Mail and stuff was some of the first people to do it way back, quite a long time ago now. And they started out interesting, and then they got more and more tabloid. This has a long tradition, but we in America, it has moved further and further from, having good investigative journalism, and a channel like Fox News has basically given up on actually showing people news.
Why restrict it to Fox? It's just
I'm not restricting it. I'm just using that as an example of some of the worst of it. But I would say, cable TV has been like that for a while. But now with the internet, you are just getting what you want. And I'm saying, in a way, that's the epitome of it. There is good news that you can find on the internet, but if you are in charge of the internet or like the algorithms are giving you more and more of what you want, you can end up down these rabbit holes where you're not getting real news at all. You're just getting like a whole bunch of conspiracy theories or a whole bunch of like opinions or a whole bunch of whatever that is more and more of the same, and you're not getting news anymore. I would say that the sort of YouTube rabbit hole kind of thing or something like that is the epitome, is the strongest version of what I'm saying.
There's I actually interviewed a guy named Mark Ledwich who looked at the YouTube radicalization theory and YouTube rabbit holes and all of that. And these mainstream outlets, say Seth Meyers and Trevor Noah, they still get way more views than right-wing YouTube. Now they'll have smaller but more dedicated followers, but the latest quip about what Republicans are doing coming from John Oliver, will have 2.1 million views or something, whereas some something coming from some Alex Jones sycophant will have 5K, right? So
yeah, and that's good, but you do have to remember that there's like fewer bigger names, in the left-wing ones that you're talking about, and on the right, you have the whole array of them, and you have a whole, they're not just on YouTube, they have other things, there's a whole array of them. It's like the opposite of like, you have just Fox News, but then you have CNN and MSNBC and whatever, it's kind of, you have to look at how many different channels you should be talking about when you're looking at these things,
Yeah. See, the left has outposts in things that are not strictly news too. So if you're looking, if you're reading music magazines, The Wire, for instance, you're going to get political opinions in there too. And celebrity influencers and things who are not actually journalists, they all expound as well. So there's a whole institutional cultural apparatus the left enjoys that the right doesn't.
That's true, but then you do have a lot of these smaller channels and things on the right as well, and news, these little like right-wing blogs and right-wing things that have a lot of views.
Note what that's saying though, small-time outlets of people who are more like regular folk with opinions. That sounds democratic. It sounds good. It shouldn't just be a few at the top, right?
I fully agree with that. If only they weren't always usually repeating the same lies that came in through, through a couple of big names. A lot of these websites tend to be just reprints of John Solomon, who's like a Russian agent spreading lies. A lot of them, they're not that independent, and they're just little startups that keep spreading the same right-wing, propaganda, disinformation stuff and make money off of it. Unfortunately,
yeah. I'm more dismayed by just a general culture of startup entrepreneurialism and the constant disruption and precarity there, more than constant upstart of opinion makers online. So
I'm all for constant entrepreneurs and all of that. I just want them to do good work as well.
Yeah. Well, with that said, I think I'm going to wrap it up.
Cool. All right.
Talk to you later, Guinevere.
All right. Yeah. Cool. Nice to chat. Talk soon.